Thanks to everyone who's dialed in today to our Zoom. Looking forward to a great conversation with you, Jim. And most of all, thank you, Jim, for taking the time. And not just the time, but also your willingness to share your perspective on Box and COVID and everything else that's sort of going on right now. Just on a personal note, where are you zooming in from today?
In from Columbus, Ohio, from my basement in Columbus, Ohio.
All right. Well, you've got a very well lit basement, as we were talking about. So we're all struggling with the Zoom backgrounds and lighting and everything, but you're doing a great job. So let's just dive right into it. And I want to start with just a little bit of background for folks. Nationwide is certainly a household name here in the U.S., but I think people think of it as an insurance company, and actually it's a lot more than that. So I'd love for you to give a little bit of background on the company, and just tell us a little bit about something about Nationwide that people might know.
Yeah, so Nationwide, as you said, not just insurance. Fortune 67 company has gone from 120 to 67 over the last 10 years. Mainly from growth in our financial services business. So you think about us as kind of home, auto, life, but we also have a fairly large commercial insurance business and a large financial services business. We're one of the largest producers of 457 retirement plans for public sector employees.
Okay. And you've got an interesting mission statement. And would you mind sharing that and then also kind of give the technology kind of perspective on it?
Yeah, so we've been really working on this for the last year. We had a new CEO step in, and when he stepped in, we wanted to work on the mission of the company. And it's the mission turned out to be to protect people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care. We, at the end of the day, we make promises to people, and the promise is to protect them in the moments that they need us, and that might be after a fire or an accident, or it might be in retirement. And so we focus on the things that we can do to better protect people. And we believe that technology plays a big role in that. We'll describe the company as technology enabled, but people connected, and how we deliver against that mission. And so a lot of how we think about protection is going to be driven by the technology that we've been implementing. The last 8 years, we've invested over $1 billion re-implementing every transactional system we have inside the company. So new policy management, new claims, new retirement planning systems, all to make sure that we can serve out that promise of the mission.
So we're going to talk a lot about technology, but before we jump too much into the detail, I also want people to understand your scope in relation to all this. So your title is Chief Technology Officer, and that title can mean a lot of different things in different companies. So can you kind of give us a sense of what it means for you at Nationwide?
Yeah, in fact, we recently retitled it. When we came out with the mission of the company, we talked about technology enabled but people connected. We thought it was important to draw the parallel to the role of CTO as chief engineer, that the technologists inside Nationwide have responsibility for delivering the technology that keeps the promises. And so we went from the kind of what I'll call the legacy title of Chief Information Officer to Chief Technology Officer, and in the light of kind of Chief Engineer, the engineer that delivers the technology to keep the promise.
So does that mean that today Nationwide does not have a role that's called CIO anymore? It's just CTO?
That's right. We have CTOs. So I'm the CTO for the company. Then we've got CTOs for our business lines that report up into me, and we've kind of embraced that idea that technology is the engine. It's the manufacturing arm of a financial services company.
Okay, that's super interesting. So I'm assuming in that role, then you're thinking about not just the technology that enables your own employees, but also your customers. Is that fair?
Yeah, you got it. So when you think about our customers, there's kind of two different levels. You've got participants or members, right? So you or I might have an auto policy or a retirement plan with us, but then there's also intermediaries, agents, brokers, and RIAs. And so not only am I thinking about, and my team thinking about how technology enables Nationwide to operate more effectively, but also those agents. You know, we think about disruption from our terms, and you see a lot of insurtechs that are popping up that want to deliver insurance in new ways. Our intermediaries, those agents, are feeling it just the same way we are. And we view it as our job to help them in their own transformation. And so we've recently launched a product called Nationwide Express. In the last 2 months, we've deployed it across a few hundred agents in the United States. And it's basically a set of code that they pop into their website, and it allows them to quote and bind product in a digital manner. It comes with a way to brand the insurance with their label, It gives them a mobile experience they can put along with it. And so when we're thinking about digitization, it's not just about our own process, but how we can give technology to our intermediaries to better serve our members at the end of the day.
So that's really interesting. So you're talking about independent agents and intermediaries. They're not employees of Nationwide, but you're providing technology that's not even branded Nationwide, it sounds like,
Yeah.
but provides a better experience for their customers.
Yeah, digital transformation is not just happening in a direct to consumer, but it's in the intermediary market. So picture, everybody can relate to home insurance. So picture you're at your kid's t-ball game and you're sitting next to your agent and you say, you know what, I need to come in and talk to you. And they say, what do you need to know? Well, I haven't really looked at my insurance recently. I wonder if I'm getting the best policy and the best rate. We've recently launched functionality where the agent can pop out their phone and an app that's branded as their agency. Say, hey, do you have your driver's license with you? And you say yes, and they snap a picture of the back of your license, and automatically 60 seconds later, it will find the cars that are registered in your name, the homes that are registered to your address. It will give you back a combined quote for your home and auto policy in 60 seconds that you could hand back over to your friend at the game. We need to provide experiences like that. It's not just the experience for the member who's looking for the quote, right? That was great because they didn't have to give any information to get the quote, but also for the agent to be able to sell in the moment wherever they might meet that member. And so we think about that as a journey. We've got a customer at the end of the day that we want to serve and their intermediary wants to serve. And we think about what are all of the different ways they might interact with us and how do we use technology to meet them in the moment that they're in that journey.
That's it's amazing, and it's actually synchronized really well with the question. Our first question actually came in, which is along these lines, which was asking, what are the activities that Nationwide is doing to make it easier for the customers to do business with you and to free up employees from manual work? And that's a great example right there. Are there other examples like that you can share?
Yeah, there's ones that everybody would think about. We still process 2 million checks a year. And that might seem odd because you think that would be a more digitized process, but people still are getting paper checks for claims and refunds, and that's an expensive process for us, and it's a time-consuming process for our customer. So there's simple things that we're doing about converting over everything to ACH. It's a cheaper transaction for them. It's a cheaper transaction for us. It's a faster transaction for the customer. They get their money faster. But there's still some simple things like that we could be better at. And then there's a lot more complex things. You think about our retirement plans business, being able to log in, see your retirement, understand what your monthly income in retirement is going to look like in a very easy to consume fashion is something that's been very important to us. In fact, we are using a lot of the investment we've made in underlying technology, and we launched in 16 weeks a brand new mobile application that focused on our retirement plans owners to give them a different look and feel, one that felt like to them they were seeing what their retirement income was going to look like and being able to add to that other information that helps them plan for and live in retirement better. So again, it's again back, how do you provide the most frictionless experience for the customer, whether that be the member or the intermediary?
Got it. And we jumped right into the technology side of this, which is great, as well as kind of the business benefit. But I want to kind of skip back a little bit, which is a little bit more about you, because Nationwide is not your first engagement with Box, and so I'd love to you talk a little bit about your journey just to this role, what you did before, how long you've been there. Then we'll talk a bunch about the transformation you've been driving at Nationwide, but would also love to you to kind of bring in a little bit about your history with Box.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for, I guess now, hard to believe, going on 26, 27 years. And I started off my career working for NCR and AT&T, and from there went to consulting. Loved kind of all those different companies I worked for, where I kind of got my early career. But where I'd say I really grew as a technology leader was 18 years at General Electric. I came into General Electric in their aviation business unit down in Cincinnati, Ohio, and was given the opportunity to work in almost every business unit inside of GE over those 18 years, and I ended in the group CIO role. That's where I had my first interaction with Box. We were an early adopter of Box there as the kind of replacement for the file share inside the company, and it grew to be kind of much larger over time in different business units. And then I got a call about 2 years ago from a friend of mine who said, "Hey, I think you should come and check out a role that's opening up." And I wasn't looking, and I really had no interest to leave. We had just gone through some leadership changes, and but I did a favor to a friend, and I came and I talked to the leadership team here in Nationwide, and what I expected to be a show up, do my friend a favor, go home role, and instead was kind of blown away by a leadership team who was embracing the fact that they recognized that their company had to become a technology company to be relevant for the next 100 years, and they were looking for somebody to come in and partner with them on that. And so after a couple of different discussions, all the way up to the board, where it just became evident to me that technology was at the heart of the business strategy at Nationwide, made the hard decision to leave GE and come here. And here, Box has been just as great a partner as it was at GE. Not only have we used it for a file replacement tool, but really for document management. We're using it, for example, in our claims area, where we're gathering photos and information from a claims site. We're using Box as the back-end document store to be able to flow through our claims management system, and even starting to look at now, how do we open up some of the APIs related to artificial intelligence to be able to do some of the inspection of pictures, and hopefully at some point get to auto adjudication of the claims based on those photos. So there's just a lot going on, and a lot of a really long relationship between Box and Nationwide.
And I think at GE, you were probably involved in the decision to bring in Box. I think Box may have already been there when you joined Nationwide. Is that right?
Correct. It was already here, and at GE, we had our own homegrown system called Support Central, and we moved over, but it was already here, and it was already a long relationship at Nationwide when I got here.
And one of the questions we've got from the audience is actually around the sort of the tipping point for switching, and particularly, I remember GE very well, where a lot of investment had been made in the homegrown system. It was used universally, across the board, and it was a pretty big decision. So, and while you weren't involved at Nationwide, you may have some perspective on that decision. But what the question from the audience is sort of, what kind of got you to the point of saying, yes, we need a different sort of content management solution, and Box is the right one?
Content management, document management are kind of two titles that have been around for a long time, and like a lot of systems that I would say grew up in the kind of the 90s, kind of gotten overloaded and overweight, overfeatured in some cases, and were really, because they tried to be everything to everybody, had become very difficult to maneuver, right? To get them to do what you needed them to do became probably more complicated than it needed to be. And so I think one of the things that we've always loved about Box is you've stuck to kind of a standard architecture. You've stuck to some standard ways to interface in and out of the product. You've been very maniacal about what you want the product to be and not be. And I think that's kept it very simple to use. And so we love the open API interface. We believe the API economy is not just hype now, but here. You've given us those plugins, and now even think about, as we move into more event streaming and how we take information in real time, giving us some abilities to plug into our real-time business processes. You've been there along the way, listening and getting that functionality into your product, but in a way that it's not gotten overweight and it's not gotten too hard to use.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I can tell you, as a almost 9-year member of our executive team, we spend a lot of time debating about what to put in, but I think it's importantly, you said what not to put in and where not to go. And one of our kind of core mantras has always been simplicity for the end user, and the more features you stuff into a product, the less simple it is. So that's definitely been a key part of it. And we're definitely super excited the work you're doing, not just on the core content management side, but also with the APIs, because we see ourselves as a content platform. And I think that's well in line with what you're doing. You talked about, I think, about 8 years of transition in terms of a whole bunch of systems across Nationwide. And I'm sort of curious, is there a guiding principle or philosophy for that change? How does cloud fit into it? Obviously, Box is a cloud-only, cloud-first solution. How do you think about cloud, and how is that kind of driven part of the transition strategy you've been in?
There were kind of two lucky parts about this job. One, I was taking the reins from a really strong leader who was able to convince the leadership team that it was time to go back and rewrite the mainframe systems from the 70s and 80s. And that's not that's not an easy job to get through, just the, not only the convincing to do it, but the actual work to get there. And the concept was, we knew that the future was going to be about being connected to our customer where they were. We knew it was going to be about being able to link the data across our systems in a way to create a more personalized experience. And we knew the only way that we were going to do that is to get off of the legacy systems onto more modern platforms. We talk about wanting to be one open. All of our products need to be open. The products we sell need to be open and available in whatever ecosystem a customer wants to get it. It needs to be automated. We need to automate all of the manual touch that's non-value added. Being able to be frictionless in the transactions that we do was going to be important. And so as we kind of went through the modernization, we looked at the automated piece of it. And then we said it also needed to be intelligent, personalized. We needed to be able to pull data about a person. You know, that example I gave you early on about taking the picture of a driver's license. If you think about what's behind that, it's, you know, I've got DMV records, I've got real estate records, I've got personal information that I've got about other policies that you may have with Nationwide. I've got other data that I've got from other ecosystems outside of Nationwide, pulling that together to create a personalized experience where you got a quote for only giving us a picture of the back of your license and not having to tell us VIN numbers or addresses. You can't do that if you're on legacy systems that are still sitting on mainframe platforms where you can't hook across systems. And so what my predecessor and his team did was really sell that concept of being open, integrated, intelligent, automated, as a way to empower both our customers and our intermediaries. And it's that really that got the pull through to be able to rewrite those backend systems. And we're seeing it pay off today in our ability to meet members in these transactions.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of secret sauce in there, but one of the questions we've got from the audience is, can you share any of the sort of technologies that you're using to kind of make all this work across underwriting, policy management, sales, call centers, and do it in a way that you don't have chaos? I mean, we're big believers in best of breed, but best of breed also means lots of different technology, lots of integration. How, you know, what are some of those technologies for you, and how do you make it all work?
Yeah, so part of it is knowing when to build versus buy, and there's a mix of both in here.
Yep.
And you know, I don't want to turn this into a free advertising session for every partner that we work with, but I would tell you, like on the policy management side, we decided that was not something that it was worth our time and effort to build, and so we bought policy management. We bought a claims system. We've got a great partnership with Guidewire there, and they've been a long-term partner for Nationwide, and that's worked out well. Same on the life insurance side. We decided that was a place where we wanted to buy a platform, but retirement plans a little different. We think that there is some strategic advantage to us owning the platform for retirement plans, that there's some functionality that we can get to market faster for our customers that way. Yeah. So at the underlying system, there's a mixed breed of kind of homegrown and purchased platforms. But the real secret sauce sits in what we've started to call the Express platform. And this is something that we've written around the rest of the environment. And it's a layer that sits between those transactional systems and everything that we go to market with. We've exposed over 250 transactions inside that platform. There's over 60 that we expose outside Nationwide. You can see those at developer.nationwide.com. And the idea is it's that platform where you can pick and choose the transactions and the products that you want to hook together in a way that you can distribute them to your customers in different ways. So Nationwide Express plugs into that platform, and it allows it to go after auto products, home products. It can go after life products. That platform is what provides the kind of secret sauce inside of Nationwide that makes this all work.
So that's really interesting. You've taken this concept of open to a level where you've got the developer platform, open website, I assume. And so anyone could go build a third-party app that leverages your services and products.
Yep. You can go out today. You can write your own application and hook and quote and bind your own policies if you choose to. This is where we're working with our agents. They want to be more digital. To be more digital, they need to be able to transact. Our idea was exposing those transactions so they can hook it into the websites, the Facebook sites, wherever they want to transact with their customer. We want to give them the ability to do that.
That's really cool. And do you then highlight some of the solutions that are built by those independents, or are they just sort of on their own to market that to their customers?
for the most part, we're letting them, they're the marketing arm, right? They own the customer at the end of the day. It's their customer. They want to own the marketing to the customer. That's why we believe in the independent agency model. Giving them better tools to transact with their customers, making it a more frictionless transaction is our responsibility. They own the marketing to the end customer.
And interestingly, we've actually got a question which says, for technology companies that don't have a pre-existing relationship with Nationwide, how should they engage with you? Do they go to the developer site? Is there a team that they talk to, or what do they do?
Yeah, we've got a partner platform team that they can reach out to. If they go to developer.nationwide.com, they'll find contact information there. But that's a great place to interact with us if you're interested in a relationship.
Okay, awesome, great. So much great stuff. We've got more questions coming in here than we've ever had, I think, actually, for these sessions. So great job, Jim. I'm trying to think even kind of where to go to next. We haven't talked at all about COVID or remote work, which is kind of incredible since we're 23 minutes into this thing. But we'll do that in a second here. Is there anything else, I think, on the technology side? Oh, actually, I do want to ask you, is you talked about buy versus build, and I think everyone struggles with that question in every one of these technology decisions. Is there a set of questions that you ask the teams to try and sort of tease out what the right answer is? Because most people say, well, if there's no competitive advantage, then there's no sense in building it yourself. But how do you know that? Like, what do you ask, or where do you probe with your team to make that call?
Yeah, I always start by asking the sales team what makes the sale for them. When they win a deal, why? So when we're out talking to an independent agent, what causes them to sell our products over another? When we're selling to an end user, a member, why do they buy Nationwide's product over somebody else's? And people look at me weird, like, why are you asking that question? I'll tell you a little bit of a longer story, John, because I think it goes here. I learned this lesson the hard way. In one of my jobs, I inherited a system that had been going through a re-implementation. So it was a legacy mainframe system that had been built kind of when I was in the 7th grade, and it was being replaced with a popular package that did the same functionality in the marketplace. And when I came into my role, this project had been going on for over 6 years. Mm-hmm. It was a few $100 million into the implementation. It had deployed in one region of one part of the world, and we were kind of stuck. And so I started asking, I said, well, what's wrong? And I said, why have we not, we're this far in and this much money spent. Why is this not working? I said, what was the premise? I said, well, the product we sell is commoditized. So we're putting a commodity solution in place, yet we're finding that we're having to go back and make a lot of modifications. And so you start to hear words. No one wants to say customize. Mm-hmm. You hear configure. You hear configure, you hear modify, you hear change. What you really start to figure out is they're customizing the product. And then you start to say, well, if it's really a commodity, why are we customizing it? Right. Well, the customer is looking for X. And so then that's when I stopped and I pulled the sales team in. I said, well, when you're out selling this product, why do you win? And the answer was because we can change the product. And this happened to be an information product. We can change the product to what the customer is asking us to do within 30 days. What do you mean by that? Well, while there's 4 or 5 flavors of this in the industry, there's 4 or 5 flavors with 100 variants each. And what our customers like about us is if they ask for a new variant, we can turn it around in 30 days. And so what I quickly got to is the competitive advantage wasn't that it was a commodity. It wasn't that they thought that their competitive advantage was the relationship. It was the fact that they had a mainframe system that actually worked well, and every 30 days they could pop out new code. And I said, your strategic system is this mainframe system. Don't give it up. And we actually threw out the packaged application and went back to the mainframe application as the strategic product. So my long story, back to your original question, is start by understanding why customers make the choice to buy your product. Right. And if that choice has to do with functionality that the system gives you for them, then you don't ever want to buy that. You always want to build that. If you find that it is truly a commodity and the transaction doesn't matter in the product, then that's the stuff that you want to go buy, not build.
That's a great tip. So we're hoping everyone comes away from this with a few best practice ideas, and I love that one. One question that's kind of come in is you're talking a lot about innovation and a lot of change being driven over a number of years, and you're in a regulated industry, obviously. So how do you balance rapid change and innovation with still making sure that you're fully compliant with all the FinServ regulations and everything else that you've got to adhere to?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of people shy away from regulation, and they think, wow, regulation bad. I want to walk away from it. One of the things I found at Nationwide is a regulatory team that actually thinks the opposite. They recognize that, we have, in our industry, we're regulated state by state. So every state has a different set of regulators, and they've got a different flavor of regulation by state. But when you realize that they're really just looking out for the consumer, and you embrace the fact that they're looking for the consumer, you actually can let the regulator work to your benefit, not to your detriment. One of the things I didn't understand about Nationwide when I came here is we're a mutual company. You may not know this. We came out of the Ohio Farm Bureau in 1926. Our heritage is farming. We are owned by our members. I am not held to a quarterly profit target. We make a profit to be able to keep the promises that we made to members. So that profit goes into reserves that are used to pay out policies and to help people in retirement. And so when we're with a regulator, we find that we're not at odds with them. We're not looking out for a shareholder who's looking for more quarterly profit and we want to change a product. We're talking to the regulator about how can we make the product work better for the member. And so one of the things that I just have been energized by here is our regulatory team leans into the regulator to say, what do they want to see more of, or how can we help them create an environment that is better for our customer? I think that's been really refreshing. It's been nice to be in a company who thinks about the regulator that way.
Yeah, and I think one of the really cool examples of this is you all just issued a refund to your members because of the fact that people aren't really driving right now. I think it was for the auto policies. Is that right?
Refund to our members, and you're seeing that with most auto policies, where we're going to go as a step further. All of those auto policy owners are getting a message about a new product that we launched last year called Smart Miles. And Smart Miles, basically, you only pay for when you drive. We think the consumer's behavior has changed. We think there are a lot of people who are going to continue to work from home, and their driving is going to decrease. And so our message to them is stop paying for your insurance rates then. Well, only pay when you're driving the car. And so we're going to go the next step to say, not only are we going to give you money back as a rebate for this quarter, but we're going to actually give you a new product that you can sign up for where you really only pay when you drive the car going forward. And so again, we're trying to make sure that our interests and our members' interests are always aligned.
And that was a home-built product, I assume?
Home-built product, right? There's one that differentiates you, right? That's very clear. There's only three or four companies in the United States that can provide that functionality today, and we're one of them. And we're going to hold that in-house because we know it differentiates us.
Right. And there's actually an interesting question around how you motivate or incentivize your employees to kind of come up with those kinds of ideas. I don't know if that one came from an employee or it came from top down, but do you have examples of that? And how do you get people thinking in that way?
One of the, again, and this is not me taking credit. This is because I have a great team, and this is something that they've embraced. For the past, and I'm going to get this wrong, it's been going on, I believe, for over 5 years now. We do both enterprise and local hackathons. And so we run one a year that's at the enterprise level. We bring 50 teams in. And we cap it, right? So 50 teams of 5 to 10 people each. They work for a 24-hour period. And then we as a leadership team award the top 5 of every session. And then there are sub hackathons that happen every year. That has been a huge generator for technical ideas for us. That picture of the back of a driver's license, that was developed in a hackathon 2 years ago in a 24-hour period, and it made it into the product.
Wow.
So using those hackathons as a way for people to, one, get time away from their day-to-day job to work on something they might not normally work on, but as an idea generator for us has been fantastic. There's a ton of ideas that have come out. In fact, we just got a patent for an idea that came out of a hackathon about 6 years ago that helped us gamify one of our products. And so we really value letting our associates have some kind of free space to work on innovation.
That is really cool. And actually, we do something very similar. We've had hackathons for years. And one of the things that we learned, and this is maybe a tip for folks, is that what you just said, Jim, about those ideas getting into the product. Obviously, you can't take every hackathon idea and put it into a product, but I think recognizing the innovation by your executive team, and then a few of those features or capabilities, then making in the product is a real motivator, right, for product teams and engineers. And we found the exact same thing. And one of the things we've started doing the last couple of years is actually inviting customers to our hackathons. So we actually co-innovate with customers, on our premises. And if any of you have the ability to do something like that, I would definitely recommend you do it.
Okay. I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Especially for you, where you've got the open API and people are out there kind of building stuff. It's a really good one.
And that's been the interesting part. That's, the open APIs we had launched last year before the hackathon when they did the driver's license, and they hooked right into the APIs to do the quoting. And so that's what allowed them to do it in 24 hours.
All right. So I put this off as long as I can, but let's talk about COVID.
Yeah.
And this has been pretty momentous for you, as it has for everybody. You guys have done some interesting things in terms of announcing around work from home, but let's start from the beginning and talk about what everyone had to do, which was the pivot to work from home. How were you prepared, and how were you maybe not prepared in that quick pivot that we all had to make?
So I'm going to back up a little bit. So I joined Nationwide in July of 2018. In my second week in August, a woman named Joni came to visit me, and she walked in with 2 books, 2 little pamphlets, and she walked in with the instructions for an application I needed to install on my phone. Joni's our crisis leader, and she walked me through what was one of the most extensive crisis plans I've ever seen, including the roles that I needed to play in that crisis event. And 30 days later, we went through one of 2 annual tests that we had done since I'd been here on that crisis plan, where we practice. And so when this started, and for us, the start date was in January, is when we declared the crisis first. We saw it coming from China. We spun up the crisis team, and we came together, and frankly, we just pulled the book out, and we pulled up on my phone and my little smart app, and I said, okay, what do we do? And we pulled the crisis teams together, and we started prepping for what we knew would be a work from home scenario, and something that we had worked out and tested before. So that when, March, and I'm going to get the dates right, I think it was March 13th when we made the decision to move to work from home. In 3 days, we pivoted 28,000 associates, 98.9% or something of our associates went to work from home in 3 days, and we didn't miss a beat. It's everything from our call center employees all through the senior executives of the company. And I credit it back to that plan, because 2 years before I had been here, one of the scenarios they worked through was a virus breakout in one of our buildings. And one of the things that after, when they came back together and they talked about it, the team said, well, this went really well. And a few people said, well, no, it didn't. And they was, what do you mean? Well, if we really had done this, it wouldn't have worked, because all of our call center employees have desktops. And the leadership looked at it and said, you know what, that's right. And so we went to all laptops. And so 92% of our associates had laptops, and we needed to transition to home. So there was no delay in getting hardware. We didn't have to move desktops home. Associates just went. We had to procure some monitors to get them there. And that crisis plan and tests that we did 2 years ago are what really prepped us for it.
Right.
And so the move for us to home was actually a lot easier than any of us expected it to be, and a lot less worrisome.
Yeah, the laptop one's an interesting one. One of the calls I had previously, we talked about this too, that the laptop supply chain actually kind of froze up a bit. So if you weren't in a posture where we'd already made that change, you were in a tough spot, right?
We bought back 500, almost 1,000 laptops from the company that we sell them to, and we're done. So we reversed it back. We pulled back and actually bought back things we had sold to make sure that we had enough to get through it. But again, we were so far into that, we were really just worried about replenishment. We didn't have to go into that stock, but that's where you had to turn.
Yeah, that's the one issue we've seen, is that we've seen a higher replacement rate on people working from home than we saw in the office. I don't know if people are more clumsy in their home offices. I'm not sure, but we've had to replace more than we typically do. But other than that, we're 100% laptop.
Well, I've seen Aaron. He just kind of throws his laptop around.
That's true. Aaron's probably not the best example. So you all made the pivot really quickly because you were prepared. I am curious, did you make that decision in one fell swoop, or was it a phase like, recommended work from home to mandatory, or was it just one day, everyone's mandatory, you got 3 days to do it and go?
So we had been talking about it for a couple of weeks, and the question was when.
Right.
One of the things we did is the day before we made the decision, we sent my whole team, we sent the entire tech team around the US home. We said, go home, but let's just see what happens. We think we're going to be fine. Let the onus be on my team. I've got one of the largest teams in the company. So we sent them home. And again, we didn't even see a blip. And so the next day it was just, we pulled the lever. We kept the customer facing call reps in the office, and we staged them going home, because we didn't want to affect call quality from the call center. So we said, look, for them, we're going to do it in a series of days. For all other associates, it was day one and they were gone. So day one, we said, go home. The call centers are where we staggered them over the 3 days to get them out of the office. The last group out was really my help desk, because we wanted them to be able to take calls, and we held them back to the very end. But it really just was a quick 3-day progression.
Right. Well, it sounds like you were super well prepared. So congrats. So now we're in sort of okay, we've all gone through that. We're all now working from home. And there's a question about how are you keeping employees sort of engaged? What types of technologies, in addition, what you would have had in place already to maintain communication? Even like I was talking with someone today about just the banter, the impromptu meeting a colleague that you wouldn't have met because they were talking to someone, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff goes away. How are you doing your best to maintain that?
It's funny. We went from, and we're still just using Skype, and Skype for us has been fantastic. But before we went out, Skype was used for about 20,000 meetings in a given week, and it was really just used for the phone number. They didn't really share content. They didn't share documents. They certainly didn't do video, and that was really the way that it was operating. We saw the meetings triple to 60,000 meetings. We saw us go to 1 million chat transactions in a day. We saw us go to kind of 3x the number of point-to-point audio calls. The collaboration tools went from being a nice-to-have tool for meetings to be a mission-critical system for us. And I think that's probably pretty indicative of what most technology, most CTOs and CIOs saw, is their collaboration tools went from being mission-critical overnight. So much so that our leadership team, our CEO and his direct staff, really they would do all hands meetings, but they very rarely did video, and they did video from kind of an auditorium where we had a team that supported them. To overnight, we were literally doing videos for the entire company, where we'd be 4 or 5 of us sitting at home broadcasting out through our broadcast products, doing video from home. So video has become a staple for us. Our CEO has done about an all-employee meeting every other week since we've been out and working from home, and each of his directs are doing their own level of that. And we've also added in several what I call HR type meetings, everything on meetings about wellness, health and safety, that we've been pushing out through video. So video has become, I think, a bigger staple for us in how we're keeping people connected than it ever was before the pandemic.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing, and we were pretty video savvy prior to this, but now you're forced to be. We do weekly Friday lunches, and we've seen the participation rate in that event skyrocket because everyone's on a level playing field. Before, it was if you were physically in the room with Aaron on stage, you had a very different experience than if you were on the other end of a broadcast. And now
people were worried that we would lose the cultural and the personal connection, and it's a little bit the opposite. I know who has a dog now. I know who has, kids at home. I know their names. I know what they look like. I know that my HR partner had somebody who's in the military because I see the framed flag behind him on his bookshelf. And so you've kind of gotten this view into everybody's personal life at home where you're learning a little more about them. And I'd argue, at least in the short term, our personal relationships with our associates actually has gone up a little bit because we've gotten a little bit of a view behind what we see at work into their personal life.
And what do you see carrying forward from this? And you all have made some pretty big business decisions around work from home going forward, but can you talk about that? And then also just what do you see being a permanent change versus what's going to, in your prediction, what's going to kind of revert back to the past?
Our business continuity plan told the process leaders to expect a 40% reduction in productivity during a pandemic. So that was stated in the plan. You're going to lose 40% productivity. While week one, there was a little bit of a blip, what we've actually seen in the data and the things that we can measure is that we are equal to or better than the productivity levels when we were in the office. Now, there's a lot of factors in that. People aren't taking vacations, so you've got more workers in the office, and so that affects productivity. People are giving us their drive time right now, right? If they were spending an hour on the road driving to and from work, we're getting that as office time now. So we're getting productivity from that. But it's still productivity. We're still getting more output. And I'd say, and I've said this to my team, I was not a believer in work from home in agile teams. I really believed in the model that you needed to be co-located together with your business partners in a way that you could deliver. And my team, frankly, proved me wrong in this exercise. We measure story points delivered by week by line, and our story points are actually, in many cases, improving. They're getting more story points out the door. And so as a leadership team, we kind of stood back and we said, hey, there's something here. And we had been looking at ways to reduce our real estate footprint across the United States. And where we always got hung up on was the people. Right? We have people we needed in those offices. How can we close the real estate? And what we learned is work from home was an option for us. And so we made an announcement a little over a week ago that we're going to have 4 primary locations inside the United States: Scottsdale, San Antonio, Des Moines, and Columbus. And that every other location, other than some sites that are required by law for our legal team, we're going to send everybody else to work from home permanently. And so our PNC business will, I think, be over 50% of their workforce working from home. As a total company, we'll have over 30% of our workforce working from home. And I think it's good for everything. I think it's good for productivity for the company. It's good for our associates because they are telling us they are more productive and they like that. They feel in some cases safer working at home right now. And so we think it's a good long-term solution for everybody, and we're going to lean heavily into it. Now, it's early. We're going to keep watching the data. We're going to let the data guide the decisions, but we're probably being more aggressive than some other companies have based on the data we've seen already.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, are you aware of any other Fortune 100 companies that have made this kind of big of a commitment yet?
I've had a lot of people reach out and talk to me about it. I was in a couple of sessions. Literally the day we made this, I was with about 25 CIOs from other companies, and a lot of people talking about it. I think everybody's still skeptical and they want to see the data longer before they pull the trigger. But I can tell you, I mean, I think even saw this today on a stat on CNBC. CFOs are now really talking about this seriously. They don't know that they need the office footprint going forward. And I think if you watch, companies are also choosing slower timelines to come back. We'll open our doors for our first group of associates to come back to work here in Columbus on June 1st. And we've done it pretty much by volunteer, and about 25% of our associates said they want to come back to the office. I think other companies have held off that decision, and I think when they get to the point they make that decision, it's going to force them, because to be able to do social distancing in the office, you're not going to have enough office space to bring everybody back, and so you're going to have to figure out some alternative model.
Right. Okay. That's really great stuff. I've got just a queue of questions teed up, and they're not all aligned exactly what we're talking about. So I may do some rapid fire stuff with you, Jim,
okay,
on some of these. But I would like to just talk about Box in this context for a second. We've definitely seen an uptick in our usage. Can you talk a little bit about, you talked about the technology that support this. What have you seen happening with Box usage specifically in this kind of work from home?
For us, where our focus with Box is going to be is with our claim reps, and we're having to really rethink how claims operations works. And so we're seeing Box usage there as a way to, again, we can't send people out to people's houses right now. And so there's a lot of photo documentation, video documentation that's coming in for them to adjudicate a claim. And so that in itself is going to drive this behavior. And so we've seen that happen. And then we've seen it on external storage or external sharing. As you know, we're not letting, even though we're opening the office on June 1st, we're still not allowing any guests. I think it'll be a long time before we allow guests to come back in the office. And when you're working with consultants, et cetera, the ability to share information back and forth, I think, is going to drive collaboration tools. We know Box is going to be the way that we're going to handle a lot of that data transfer and data transmission. And so, again, collaboration in total and Box as it relates to kind of document management and content management, I think are all going to see a push and become more mission critical than they were before.
Yeah. Definitely agree. I think we're seeing the same. And one of the questions is, do you think video can ever completely replace the in-person experience?
No, I mean, and this is still old school in me. There are relationships that you build face to face that you can't do over video. And I truly believe, and so you ask, why do we still have offices? I still believe people have to come together. This is a debate right now. I've had a lot of people say, hey, if we're working from home permanently, can I move and live wherever I want to? And my answer has been so far no, because even though you're work from home, there are times when we're going to ask you to come together as a group. When you're onboarding new team members, I don't think you can do that always over video. When you're integrating or working on a new initiative, I think you got to come for big room planning together in a room. There's an interaction and a personal relationship that has to be built. And so I'm of the school that I think there's still a world where there has to be some face-to-face work that gets done. I think it's got to be safe first, and we're going to always err on the side of employee safety before we get there. But I'm not a believer that you can build relationships like that. Now, the flip to that, though, just is my son, 16-year-old son, sitting upstairs with friends all over the world online who he never sees. So,
right.
We'll see what's right and what's wrong. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a generational thing.
Yeah, it's definitely formative for kids who are kind of dealing with this for the first time. It'd be interesting to see how that then kind of translates into how they think about the communications in the future. Was there anything that you didn't anticipate or underestimated the complexity of in all this? It sounds like super well prepared. What'd you miss?
So one of the things I didn't know that I owned when I took this job is our document solutions, which includes the mailroom. And I got to be honest, the most complicated part of COVID was people didn't contemplate what to do with mail. And so while we had a process for how to handle physical mail coming in, I would tell you we spent way too much time looking for stuff for people who didn't think about it until it was too late. And so one of the things that we're really now looking at is how do you digitize mail? So instead of doing any physical mail delivery going forward, we're going to go to a digitized content delivery where we scan people's mail and it shows up in their inbox of email, not physically at their desk. We thought about the big scale things. We had digitized how we do, checks coming in, how we did forms coming in, but it's the one-off stuff, the refund check that comes from another company or from a government. That's the stuff that we just spent way too much time trying to figure out as we went through the pandemic.
Got it. Okay. So we've only got about 10 minutes left. So let me hit a couple of these that are a little off topic. There's a couple questions around security, and specifically things like reported increases in phishing and social engineering activities. I spoke to one customer whose initial response was, let's kind of back off of some of the internal phishing attempts that we do, right? And then it was like, no, we can't do that because actually this is getting worse and more sophisticated. So there's a couple questions around how you've kind of seen that, how you've responded to it, what you've done to kind of protect the company on that specifically.
Yeah, and I would say we saw exactly what you said, which is it got worse. People were opportunistic and they took advantage of the fact that all of our call centers were now working from home in a different environment and challenging the process. And so we actually increased phishing. We increased our education. We increased the work that we do with certain technologies to be able to identify who our agents are talking to. We especially in our retirement plans business, we doubled down with our agents to remind them of the procedures they have to go through to verify identities before they do any sort of payouts. And we saw it on day one. We saw them getting phone calls, really not even phishing emails, phone calls trying to portray themselves as other people who had retirement plans with us. And so this is not one we shied away with. We've been leaning in. We've got more work to do, but this has been a focus area for us.
Got it. Okay. there's a question around content management, enterprise content management specifically, and the question is, do you still have, obviously you've got Box, but do you have other ECM products in your portfolio? And if so, how do you integrate those different systems together, or do you?
You probably had a question I don't know I'm going to give you a great answer to. So,
okay, all right, do your best.
I'm not even going to try to answer it because I'll get it wrong, and I'll have like 20 people telling me I got it wrong later.
All right. So here's one fun one. How do you take advantage? You mentioned a little bit about artificial intelligence being applied to some of the data that you're getting in from customers, photos and so forth of accidents. How are you taking advantage of some of the capabilities that are available today to better serve your customers? And do you have any examples?
Yeah. And just generally with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, machine learning,
Yeah.
deep learning. Yeah, that whole category.
I'll tell you the one that everybody understands that I think is really interesting is in our life insurance business. If you've ever gotten life insurance, it's not the easiest process in the world, and it's not the shortest process in the world. And it usually involves a nurse or a doctor showing up at your house and taking your blood. We actually built an engine that actually, based on the way you answer questions and the data that you put on the form, can actually determine the likelihood of you needing to have a doctor's visit or a medical test. And so we can actually adjudicate and take through the process and underwrite a life insurance policy for a certain level of policy for a fairly large percentage of policy applicants without them ever having to see a doctor. The agent, the first week we turned it on, the first policy that went through, the agent called us because they thought there was something wrong with the system, because we literally took the request in for the policy and returned them a bound policy in 4 hours. Right. And they're like, this is a 30-day process. Something is wrong that you gave this back to me in 4 hours, but the AI engine is actually what's determining whether or not we're going to underwrite the policy and whether or not it needs to go through a medical test or not.
That's incredible. And the premiums for the customer would be exactly the same. You've made the decision that you're willing to take that risk.
Yeah, same price, right? And that's the way that it's priced. Think about this was a 30-day process in general before that went to, you can do it in a day.
Right.
So it was a huge cycle time reduction for us, and for an agent who's sitting with a customer making that decision, that's on their mind when it's on their mind. 30 days later, sometimes it's hard to get them to come back and finish binding the policy. So this is a big deal for them.
All right, just scanning thank you. Those are great. Scanning kind of list here for last couple of questions. Here's a good one actually that we bump into a bit with our customers, where Box, obviously all of content in Box is encrypted by us, and you've got the ability to manage the keys yourself if you want to. But the question here is, have you considered using any document encryption technology that follows the document throughout the full life cycle, right? So what happens to the document when it's not sitting in your content management system, like Box? So are you doing anything there?
Yes, and I'm going to pass on that one.
Okay, great. All right, that's fair. And here's an interesting one. How do you think about the trade-off when you're, again, trying to encourage people to innovate and build new technologies? And we talked about this a little bit from a regulatory perspective, but when you think specifically about security and convenience, how do you think about that kind of trade-off with innovation?
Yeah, we're a company that had a breach.
Okay. How long was that?
And it was before my time, so I'm going to get the date wrong, but let's say it was 6-7 years ago. Okay. We went through a breach. We had lots of oversight from attorneys general across the United States. We're not going to let that happen again. I go back to our mission statement. Our mission statement is protect people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care. That protect with extraordinary care, cyber is a big piece of that. We take a lot of pride in making sure that we put the protection of the information that our customers let us hold at first. And there are going to be times when protecting information and data are going to win out over functionality. And so I go back to that mission statement makes it really easy for us, because you go back to protect people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care. You're not going to short sight or shortcut your way around kind of security and policy and procedure.
Yeah. And that's I love kind of coming back to the mission as we wrap up here. And we've obviously, because of the nature of what we do, we don't protect lives in the same way that you do, but we protect, information and content. And your point about never trading a feature for security or that's central to us. And we'll give up features all day long if we think it would impair security.
This is where I think Box has been a really great partner. I mean, one of the first companies to let us hold our own keys, one of the first companies to really think about encryption over the life of the document and how it flows through different hands, to think about the regulatory side of this, how you do discovery after the fact. This whole area of information risk management, you plug into it all of the different elements. And I think you've been a good partner in all the companies that I've been with that have worked with Box. This is where you stand out amongst your peers.
Thank you very much. And we continue to innovate there as much as we can with things like Box Shield and malware detection and everything else that we're doing. So thank you for that. So we just have 2 minutes left. I love kind of wrapping here with that, reverting back to the mission. But with just a couple minutes left, any other tips, hints, best practices for your fellow practitioners on the call here? Anything that they should know or be thinking about?
I just tell people it's been fun and interesting to talk about getting to work from home. The harder piece is getting back to work in an office. And so if you haven't started that conversation with your peers, with your HR partners, with your environmental health and safety leaders, start now, because it's coming back into the office, I think you're going to find is a lot harder than getting out working from home. And so if people haven't started that dialogue, I'd say that's probably a more interesting and it's probably a more complicated dialogue than the path home was.
Yeah, I agree. The path home was forced and you had to do it quickly and you had to make snappy decisions. This is going to be much more phased. It's going to take longer and there's a lot to consider. And you talked about, cross-functional team. We've done the same, having, and this week, my recommendation to folks is have a cross-functional task force that includes your HR, your people operations, security, risk, technology, all of those teams working together to think through all the issues. And you should be doing that now. Totally agree. Yeah. Well, Jim, I really appreciate it. This was an amazing conversation. Like I said, generated a higher volume of questions that I've seen in any of these sessions. And we got through a lot in an hour. Again, appreciate your partnership at both companies and you taking the time to share this with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.